Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Today's guest is Tim Potter, a director who started out on the other side of the camera, working as an actor before taking the self-taught path into directing. In this episode, Tim shares how he made the shift, building a reel from scratch, pitching unpaid spec spots to real clients, and writing his first treatment in Word without even knowing what a treatment was. He talks about early insecurities, faking it, second-guessing, and holding back from asking too much, then realizing that the right questions are part of the job, a sign you're engaged, not unsure. We talk about Justin Riordan, a US comedy director whose approach to treatments and PPMs reframed what a pitch could be. Big energy, personal connection, storytelling with intent. Lessons that stuck and reshape how Tim thinks about presenting the work. We also talk about timelines, pressure, and why it's less about having all the answers and more about having the right people around you. Tim Potter. Tim, it's great to have you on, buddy. I really appreciate you taking out the time just to sit and chat. Now,
Pleasure, mate.
you've been directing commercials for a bit over a decade now?
Yeah.
And your background started in acting, because I know that you graduated VCA back in 2007, their acting course.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
So what led you to step behind the camera, and how did that transition take shape?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think my experience with getting into commercials is fairly different to most directors. It was probably quite a non-traditional path. I think most directors, they would go to film school, they'd do their 3 years there, they'd work furiously on crafting their third year film, and then use that as a calling card to go out into the industry, hope to God that they, win some awards and then can leverage that into getting on someone's roster. And that was definitely the case when I started out. But yeah, as you said, I went to acting school. I came out of acting school. I didn't have any kind of preconceived vision of being a commercial director or joining a production company. It purely happened because I started auditioning for a lot of commercials. I started getting cast in a lot of commercials, more kind of comedy skewed ads, probably because of my peculiar looking head. And I was often on sets, and acting's fantastic, but it's a lot of sitting around. It's get called up, you might deliver a handful of lines, and then you leave at the end of the day. And I was really envious of the directors, basically having their team around them, getting to kind of live and work in that creative environment, bringing this thing to life. And obviously it's something they've worked on for, maybe potentially a month prior, and then they've got all the post-production as well. So that just looked really exciting to me. And so I kind of had to work out how I would jump the fence and get to work behind the camera. And there were also directors at the time who started out as actors and then kind of merged into directing, whether TV, film, or commercials. And so I was kind of looking at them as role models, I suppose.
Now, a quick word from Advertising Production Academy, a new platform designed to help producers, marketers, and creatives understand how advertising really gets made. From free downloadable templates and rate cards to a 6-week foundational course built around real campaign workflows, the Academy brings together practical training with real-world tools. Visit adproacademy.com.au. That's adproacademy.com.au to explore what's available and access resources built for the industry. Thank you.
I did also have dreams to create my own TV series and film and be a massive global superstar. And I was like, well, if I can write my own stuff and be in it and then ride that wave to superstardom, that'll be pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And I remember Angus Sampson, an Australian actor / director, he was making commercials at the time too. So he was kind of the star that I was moving towards, I suppose. he was my guiding star. Yeah, I realized pretty early on I had to start generating my own stuff. So I wrote and produced and performed in some short films, which were fortunate to do well. And then I kind of leveraged them into creating my own content. I started up a production company. It was just me in my study. And I approached small businesses and people that I knew who had a brand, and basically I knew I had to create spec ads. I had to create a reel somehow. I had my short films, but I needed something extra. So yeah, I went to these companies and I said, look, I appreciate, you weren't thinking of creating anything. I know you don't have a budget for anything. I'll make you these ads for free, but all I ask is I get creative license. I get to write it, direct it, potentially be in them, or cast my mates. I assembled my crew. And I had full creative control, and I kind of tailored those projects in a light that, was the projects that I wanted to kind of be directing in a similar kind of style and tone. Obviously not to the budgets, but that's what I did. And I basically said to the companies, if you let me make these, if you like them, use them. If you don't like them, they'll never see the light of day. Don't worry. Fortunately, they turned out well. I was able to use them as my kind of spec reel and then approach production companies. I think, potentially another advantage of not being at film school was the fact that I was quite naive, but in a good way. Like, I wasn't aware of all the big production companies. They weren't like, sitting at the end of the road when you start film school. You're like, God, I hope I can, take my film and then approach whoever it may be and that they accept me. And I wasn't really familiar with that trajectory in that kind of world. So I wasn't kind of intimidated by it. It didn't have that cachet, I suppose. So I just approached production companies with gusto and kind of kept knocking on their door. And when they were like, oh yeah, come back when you've got something else, I was like, okay, cool. Went off, shot another thing, came back, just kept knocking on the door. And ultimately, a production company, the EP there was really generous and took a punt on me, and that was it.
And so what's the difference then? You create your short films, you go through that process, you land at a production company for commercials. Tell us what the difference was between the two and what you had to, or what you were surprised by when you were actually starting to make commercials.
Well, obviously when you're making short films, it's your creative vision and you're calling all the shots. You can cast whoever you like. You might bring a couple of producers on board and they're your mates too, and everyone's your mates, and you basically get to do whatever you like. I mean, interestingly, we shot a short film only last year, and having worked in the commercial world for 10 years, it was, dare say, it was pretty liberating. Just 7 of us just going out to the middle of nowhere and doing whatever we liked. We didn't have to sign any contracts. We didn't have to put in any, there were no restrictions. It was amazing. Yeah. So, but then, as to your question, then entering the commercial world, yeah, it is completely different. And then there's all these tiers of people that, obviously, a client, an agency, and producers. It's their baby, really, and that's a baby that they've been working on for months. And I think you really have to respect that. And even the position of being asked to pitch on a job in the first place, it's a highly competitive industry. So to be in that position, you really need to honor that too and respect that and know that, yeah, it's their baby. They've all been working on it for ages, and to do the best that you can to bring that to fruition. I think when I started out too, I had no idea about the whole treatment phase. Writing a treatment, I didn't even know what that was. I remember the EP of the production company I was with, she sent me a bunch of treatments that other directors had written. And I was just like, whoa, what is this? Like these kind of tombs of information. And it was pretty intimidating. And I reflect back on my first couple of treatments, and I think maybe I'd written a treatment. It was for like an orange juice company. And I think, maybe I hadn't even seen a treatment yet. And I just smashed out 2 A4 pages in Word. And I was like, oh, this looks pretty cool. And I didn't get the job. I think there's an absolute craft to doing treatments now, and I really respect them. And they're a lot of fun now. Yeah.
And what's your trick with treatments? Have you got a process, or what are the key bits of information you like to try and get across?
I definitely have a strong blueprint with my treatments, and I imagine most directors do. You've got your introduction, And then you cover off how you're going to set the tone of the piece, cast and performance. You discuss locations, art department, wardrobe, cinematography, sound design. Yeah, it's basically a checklist of everything you want to hit in the commercial. And I imagine I would anticipate most directors do that. For me, something that I do a little bit differently, especially with my introductions. I remember, when I started out, I would receive these examples of treatments, and I'm not saying it's wrong or right. It's just something that I do. But I remember a lot of the introductions I would read were very brief, maybe a handful of sentences, just like saying, "Hey, thanks for the chat. Had a great chat. Can't wait to launch into this. Let's do it. Rock on," something like that. And I remember when I started out, I was kind of taken under the wing of a US director called Justin Riordan, who was working with the production company at the time, big comedy director. And he'd often come out and shoot jobs here. And he kind of took me under his wing, and I was mentored by him. And I remember he did this massive campaign for Aldi supermarket, and it was this big Christmas campaign. And I mean, he was pretty phenomenal, even in his pre-production meeting and stuff. He'd get up and he'd be gesticulating and walking around the room, and it was a big kind of theatrical performance, and everyone would kind of get in behind it, and he kind of like swelled the room with excitement and enthusiasm, which was pretty cool. But even reading his treatment for that, I remember there was like a 2-page introduction to his whole treatment, and he really personalized the job to him. He discussed, this big, as I said, big Christmas ad, and he went on this massive story about his family and his crazy Christmases and all the bizarre characters and the lavishness and the extravagance of it, and touched on these weird and wonderful stories. And I think ultimately the point of that was it really proved that he got it. He got what the ad was. He got the point of it. He kind of dialed in his personal connection and the heart of the job. And then he kind of weaved that through his treatment as well. But I reckon from the introduction, you're like, okay, this he gets it. And that's, I try to do that with my treatments. And I imagine it's a lot of what creatives are wanting to see. Like, they've slaved over this job. They've gone through 1,000 iterations, and they just want to know that it's in safe hands, and it's someone who's going to bring the vision to life, elevate the vision, but fundamentally get what they're trying to achieve.
You go away and you create your treatment.
Yeah.
First up, though, you do need to have the briefing and that process with the creatives.
Yep.
How do you like that to go about?
Well, first off, ideally, in an ideal world, you want to have a little bit of time to sit with the script. You want the script to land with you for a day or two, so you can kind of germinate on it. And really, as I mentioned, like, really honor the fact that these guys have been working on this for months. A lot of energy and time and sweat has gone into crafting these scripts or script. So you want to come to the table with questions and ideas and be able to elevate, what's on the page. So ideally, if you've had a day or two to think about that, and then sit with the creatives and really nut out what they want from the campaign. And similar to, I suppose, my treatment blueprint, I like to get information about all those different categories. Basically, what are you guys anticipating the cast is going to be? How do you want the tone of performance? What's your ideal location? Art department? How do you want this shot? Are any references that we're trying to somewhat emulate? What is it about my work that you really like? Kind of ticking all those boxes, and I'll always record those briefings. And then when I'm kind of mapping out my treatment, I'll go back over my recordings, and I'll kind of furiously map it all out, and it's kind of very heavily detailed before I actually launch into putting a treatment together. And I think also the back end of briefings, potentially when I started out, when you'd be briefed and then you've got however many days to put a treatment together, I would sometimes feel reluctant to ask any more questions, concerned that they might go, oh, well, doesn't he get it? Like, we had the meeting, what more does he want? We're busy, blah, blah, blah. But I think, coming with follow-up questions, as long as there's not 1,000 of them, if you've got 2 or 3 points that you really want some clarification on, that can be only beneficial. It only solidifies what you're thinking, or if you're torn between two things and you go, okay, cool, I just need to know which direction to go in. Not only does it help you, it helps the treatment, helps the creative, and hopefully it shows also the creatives that you're invested in. You as I said, honoring their creative and wanting to make it as strong as possible.
And that relationship between yourself and the creatives,
Mm-hmm.
how do you personally like to nurture that or have access to those creatives throughout the life cycle of the project?
Look, it differs from job to job. I think, with the treatment and that initial briefing is really an opportunity for you to gain their trust, basically. As I said, like, they've got their baby, they want it in safe hands. Everyone wants to make the project as strong and as brilliant as possible. So it's an opportunity to gain their trust. And I think throughout the whole creative process, once you're signed off, you delivered your treatment, you may have engaged with them throughout that process. And then once it's signed off and you're working with your team, you've assembled your TP, your art director, location scout, casting director. I think it's nice to, as I said, it differs between each job, but it's nice to touch base with them throughout, if you have any questions. I imagine they appreciate that too, as opposed to kind of being, held at arm's length whilst you're doing all your creative stuff and we'll show you at a PPM or whatever.
And what about when you get to set, shoot days? How do you like to operate with the creatives on those days?
I always find it a really collaborative experience. I get a lot of joy out of the creative collaboration. I think, potentially every director is different. Some directors just like the kind of isolation and be with their split, and the agency and client are off on a tent 2 kilometers down the road, and the only interaction is via a walkie-talkie or something. But I love it. I think I don't mind if the creatives are standing right next to me and kind of feeding in on the communication with the actor. I think it's great. I think most creatives understand, to give the director space to try and craft the performance, and there's initial takes. And once you've they realize you've got what you're angling for, then they can kind of feed in. But I think, again, it's just about building trust.
When you are on set, and now you do have your background obviously with acting, and you have creatives beside you, and you're looking for performance, how has your acting background informed the way that you direct?
As I was saying, when I started out purely as an actor, and I was getting cast in a lot of commercials, I think I found it interesting the way some, not all directors, but some directors, in the way that they would communicate with actors. I feel like potentially some directors might think that communicating with an actor is this kind of foreign language, and they've got to have studied Stanislavski or whoever the kind of nerdy acting, lecturers are, some dusty old book or whatever. And the kind of almost, there's a fear between the director and the actor, like, how am I going to make this happen? But I think actors are, by the time you've cast your actors, they're probably pretty good standard anyway. There's some phenomenal actors out there. I think sometimes it's just about being straightforward and using common sense in the way you articulate what you want from an actor. Sometimes it's just about going, just talk a bit louder, or don't do that thing with your mouth, or why do you keep looking over there? I think by the time you've got to set two, you've created that rapport with the actors as well. So as long as you do it in a generous way, you can kind of cut through any kind of confusion. I think also as a director, having had an acting background, I like to go into all of my shoots having kind of prepared. I do all the preparation for as a director, but also I kind of prepare the actor's role as well. Often I will learn their dialogue. I will kind of map out what their actions are. Sometimes I do that prior to even the callbacks for auditions, just so it's not, I don't think it's me trying to have like full control. I still love the fact of being surprised by actors and giving them the freedom to throw out surprises. But I think it definitely streamlines some things as well. If you've only got a certain amount of time for this particular shot, you need to know that the actor's going to stand there, he's going to lift something with this hand, he's going to walk over there, he's got to turn to his left, etc., etc. Yeah, I think it just kind of accelerates some of those moments and reduces some of that confusion that can arise as well.
So what about the post-production process? How isolated do you like to be before you start bringing in different people and showing them what you're coming up with?
Yeah, good question. I think, prior to entering the edit, obviously the editor has already received, they've got the scripts, they've got the storyboards. I always create animatics as well based off the storyboards. Again, maybe it's, I will voice all the dialogue for the animatics, kind of pace it out too. So it's a pretty strong structure for the editor to work off. And then I really like to give, obviously you're handing all that information to the editor, but I also like to really respect the editor's process as well, and respect their vision and their creative input. I don't think there's any point of coming in really kind of full steam ahead and going, oh, we must have this, we must have that. Throughout the shoot, I'm kind of ticking off certain takes that I really enjoy and I think they'll work really well. So then I bring that to the edit as well. But I'm always excited by what the editor shows me. And believe it, like most of the time when you sit down and you watch that first edit, 80% of it is there. Like when you're working with great talent, great editing talent, like they know, and they're always crafting something really nice. So often it's just about kind of finessing, a handful of takes here and there, putting some options in your back pocket to show agency when they come in. But usually agency come in the following day. If you can sit with the edit for a day and then the following morning, yeah, inevitably you've put it in a pretty strong place. It always seems to work that way. Hasn't failed me yet. But.
Are there any noticeable differences in the way you put together a project 10 years ago compared to putting one together in this day and age?
I think timelines, for sure. I think timelines have accelerated, been crunched, and it's only something you kind of maybe realize as you reflect back, because you just get used to the new norm, I suppose. Yeah, even in terms of the briefings as well. From briefings through the edit, ideally, as I mentioned, like you want to be able to sit with a brief for a couple of days, really kind of honor the work that's gone into it. But, sometimes that's not possible. Oftentimes that's not possible. You got to get a call that afternoon. And if you don't get on a call that afternoon, the creatives aren't available for the next couple of days, and your treatment's due in 2 or 3 days. So, everything's kind of accelerated, and I suppose you learn to adapt, and you just go, well, they're the parameters. Let's just put our heads down and get it done. But ideally, yes, you would like more time. And that's obviously pre-production too. And then in the edit, it can be a quick turnaround in terms of, having a day to sit with the edit and then the following morning and then agency coming in that afternoon of the second day. But ideally, the editors had a day or two to sit with the footage and craft it in a nice position. So when you're going in, it's already potentially 70, 80% there and you're finessing it too.
So what's the most challenging part of your job then? We've gone through the whole process, start to finish. What do you find the most challenging part in those areas?
Look, I think this might sound a little bit ironic, being a director and having to make a lot of decisions all the time, a lot of creative decisions. But I think I sometimes find the decision-making process quite challenging, especially when you're restricted to, as you said, like time has been compacted. So you've got all these, creative plates you're spinning, and you want to dedicate enough time to each one and you want to make the right decision. I think, I'm probably a self-prescribed perfectionist, and I want to make sure I dot all my I's, cross all my T's, look under every rock, assess everything from every angle. And sometimes you don't have the luxury to do that. So you've got to make calls. And so the challenge is just kind of backing yourself, trusting your gut, trusting your instinct, trusting your sense of taste and going, yep, this is it. And not kind of, staying in your lane, not getting distracted by, being concerned about what someone else might think, or a different job that you've seen recently. You go, oh shit, maybe I should be doing these like hyper crazy transitions, or, whatever it is. Just going, okay, I know what I'm doing, and backing that. But it's interesting. There was a job I was doing a few months ago, and in terms of casting, the casting process has changed dramatically. Previously, it used to all be, you'd go into the casting studio, they had enough time to see maybe 20 actors, 15 actors, whatever it is, and they're seeing the top tier pool. They're coming in, get to meet them all. You make your short list or your selects. There might be some callbacks. But now with self-test, it's really kind of blown it wide open, which is, there's pros and cons. The pros are more actors get to be seen. You get to see potential talent you may not have seen previously. But the downside is you have to go through a lot of auditions to land your talent. So this job I was doing a few months ago had a handful of core cast, but I got the link from the casting director, and there were probably 130 self-tests that I had to go through in an afternoon and have my kind of finalized shortlist the next day. And, it's challenging. By the time you're 80 self-tests deep, your vision starts to blur. You're going, what the hell what are we aiming for again? You're seeing people audition in their bathrooms, in their kitchens, under their beds. It's like, it can be pretty full on. And yeah, so again, you got to make those strong calls and go, okay, I know what I'm doing. Let's just make some strong decisions here, whilst also honoring the fact, having an acting background, I know what goes into auditions. You got to learn the scripts. You got to bring in a reader to read opposite. You've got to film it. You got to edit it. You send it off. All the emails with your agent. So I value that. I try to honor that as much as I can too, and respect that. And interestingly, with this particular job, we ended up casting a guy who the quality of his self-test was potentially questionable. Yeah, the camera was at an odd angle. It was in his bedroom. He was half on the floor, half not. And, I think if I just kind of whizzed through, I would have risked dismissing him from the get-go. But, I found it was like finding the gold in the rough, basically. And this guy he was awesome. He was just shit house at doing a self-test. His filming skills were poor, and we ultimately cast him. So, yeah, I suppose it's just about trusting your instinct. I think another challenge that I initially found was, I don't know if this phrase is correct, but admitting holes in my knowledge. Once again, I didn't go to film and TV school. I came in as an actor, and even the treatment phase. I was starting out. I was very fake it till you make it. I'd been able to tailor ads to things that I knew how to do, and then you're getting scripts for whatever it may be, and you're like, oh shit, okay, how do I make this work? And use these skills that I've kind of finessed and bring it to this. And I was always a little reluctant to kind of put my hand up and go, fuck, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I've got a lot better at that. I think my skill set has always been in performance and casting and working with actors and tailoring strong performances and nuanced performances and kind of pushing the absurd too, but also kind of hopefully dialing in a bit of heart as well. But I know with cinematography, definitely at the start, I was always a bit intimidated by it. And within my treatments, I'd be like, okay, I'd cover off these certain elements, but there wasn't that kind of elevation. But since then, I've really tried to grow in that respect. And also, there's a massive benefit in engaging the expertise of the team you put around you. So nowadays, when I bring on a DP and they're locked in, even just putting the blueprint of the treatment together, I'm on the phone with the DP going, how can we elevate this? How can we enrich this? And it just makes a massive difference, and it totally elevates the creative, has a massive knock-on effect and domino effect to all different areas of the production. And then, you do the same with storyboarding and then so when you're getting to the recce and locations and stuff, like you're already 20 steps ahead. And the DP's feeling confident that they've had creative input from the get-go.
You just mentioned elevate. Any examples of anything recent that you could detail where you elevated some part of the script or some part of the project?
As I said earlier, like one area I really try to improve is with cinematography and to leaning into engaging a DP from the get-go at that treatment phase. There was a job last year we did. They were kind of mini doco spots, both 2 minutes, and I'd never, and they're kind of loosely based on nature documentaries, kind of David Attenborough style. and I've obviously, everyone loves David Attenborough and has watched 1,000 documentaries, nature documentaries, but engaging the DP early on, he had recently worked on some nature docos as well, which was amazing. He came to that initial treatment phase with just an entire stack of ideas and references, which were just phenomenal. I was just like, this is gold. So we put that into the treatment, and then those particular shots, like even tracking shots with kind of wildlife and long lens shots and macro shots, all the kind of stuff you see on docos, but you've got to kind of identify what they are. They came into the finished product and really elevated it. I think also, another aspect is, as I said, like I always try and craft animatics, even with these spots that were, 2 minutes long, boarded all of them, did animatics for all of them. I voiced the narration, put in temp tracks, just so that everyone's on board from the get-go. At the PPM, everyone can see the animatics and go, okay, yeah, this is awesome. This is what we're gunning for. It puts everyone in a place of confidence and excitement going into the shoot. And we all know what our target is.
What's the best piece of work, or the most rewarding, or the most memorable piece of work, for whatever reason, that you've been a part of?
Brenton, that's a challenging question.
It's like asking who your favourite child is.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a favourite child. The younger one. Nice. Depends what day it is. But I think with every project you work on, there's definitely parts of it that, you love. You have great experiences with the cast and crew and the creative. And I think I've been very fortunate. Like I've worked on some really great stuff. I've worked with some of it, Australia's top comedians. Zach Ruane, Famani Dono, stand-up comedians like Nick Cody, Michelle Brazier, and sporting royalty like Mark Webber or Craig Lowndes or the guys from Melbourne Storm. There's been lots of very enjoyable and memorable spots. I think one that kind of sticks out was a spot that I did for ANZ. And I think, I think from the get-go, even the briefing with the creatives, I was just like, this is cool. Like they were so invested. They were so enthusiastic. They'd really crafted a really sweet, it was funny but sweet script. It kind of had a Richard Curtis type Love Actually kind of vibe about it, about a young couple in their first house. And it's narrated kind of first person by the woman, and it kind of tracks their meeting at a cinema and kind of the trajectory of their relationship. And, it was really kind of sweet and straightforward, but it was just, I suppose, the excitement and the enthusiasm from client and agency kind of really bled through. Also, in terms of casting, I remember writing my initial brief to my casting director, and I had two actors who I was like, this is who we're gunning for. In an ideal world, if everything falls into place, these are the ideal cast. And I'd worked with one of the cast members previously, and the other one, the female actor, I'd really admired for years. I'd seen her at MTC productions and knew of all of her work, and just a really, really strong actor. Anyway, so they were kind of the pinnacle of what we were aiming for. Fortunately, they were available to test. They came in. We had lots of really strong actors, but these two actors kept kind of jumping the hurdles and getting through. And then ultimately, yeah, both agency and client fell in love with them as well. And I kind of, I stepped back a little bit. I didn't want to kind of be too prescriptive, but it's super rewarding, you know, having that kind of thought or that vision from the start, and then having that confirmed, by agency and client as well, was pretty cool. I think another rewarding part of that, and it's a slight aside, I think working in commercials, you get to work with some incredible people, people who are at the top of their game, incredible DPs, brilliant casting directors, location scouts, whatever it is. And it's a great opportunity to forge these connections with people who then you can work with, on maybe, potentially narrative in the narrative world. So that particular ANZ project was also an opportunity. I'd recently done a short film project with this particular art director. He'd worked his ass off, really gone above and beyond. And that was kind of the first opportunity that our availabilities aligned, and I was able to bring him in on this project, and he did an awesome job. But it was also nice to, I suppose, to be able to reward that.
So you've got memorable for all the right reasons.
Yes.
What about now? We don't want you mentioning brands. We don't want you mentioning any names. But have you been a part of something that hasn't gone well?
Yeah, definitely. I think a project pops into mind where I feel from even the initial briefing, there was some confusion as to what this product was wanting to be. I felt like reading the scripts, I was, there was some confusion about, what the end game was. And then looking at what the client had presented, and our first meetings with client, even the feedback on first pass of treatment, there were like 30 notes on the treatment, even though I was the favored treatment. So I was like, okay. So from the get-go, there was a lot of, I don't know, red flags. And then throughout the whole kind of pre-production, a similar type of thing. I think there was a disconnect between what the client wanted and what the creatives envisioned, and what they were trying to create and what the client actually thought they were going to be getting. So I felt, as a director, I was kind of straddling both worlds, trying to anticipate potentially what the client was wanting, but also to make sure that the creatives were happy and that we're all going to be happy with the finished product. So that was challenging. And how do you resolve that? I think you just have to keep putting your head down, and keep going in the direction that you're being instructed to. Like you are answerable to the agency, basically. So whatever they're saying, you need to kind of keep moving. If they keep moving the goalposts, you have to keep doing the same. And at the end of the day, too, it's really important to appreciate that this is a client's product. It's the client's product, agency's product, and you need to help realize their vision. So even if at some point you're like, oh, I'm not sure if this is what I would particularly choose, and it may not 100% align, with my taste or whatever it is, you need to, you remind yourself that this is their product. This is what they've been working on for ages. They're paying for it. So you better work your ass off to make it happen.
Advice for newcomers, directors who are starting out their careers. What's the most important piece of advice you would give them?
I think two pieces of advice would potentially be helpful. I think it's about, and it might sound a bit boring and labor intensive, but creating your own work, you kind of have to do that. And as I mentioned, I think, a lot of directors come out of film and TV school, that they have their graduate film, and they're hoping that is their passport, or that their ticket to getting somewhere. And I appreciate it's super challenging to break into the industry. But I imagine there's quite a few people who kind of, if they have that initial rejection, or it's not kind of as streamlined as they would hope, they could get a bit disenchanted by that. But I think it's just about, going, how can I create my own work? How can I make that next short film? How can I make those spec ads that are in, the tone and style that I want to be directing in the future? I recently met with a director and a DP, who have both created incredible work, just off their own bat. It's funny, similar to what I did when I started out. They approached companies with an idea. They put together a close-knit crew, and they produced work that was just phenomenal. I was absolutely blown away, and I was like, well, what was the budget on this? And they said nothing. They just did it. Again, they went to a company and just said, look, I'll do this for free if I can have creative license. Produce incredible work. It's now on their reel. And you would never know. You would never know that it was a budget of $2.50 and a cold chicken sandwich. It's pretty amazing. And second piece of advice would be to have the courage to reach out to as many people as possible. Identify people that you enjoy their work, you like their work. I think in advertising, it can, from the outside, it can look like a very large, glittery, intimidating, the doors are closed type environment. But I think when you identify individuals that you really like and you like their work, more often than not, everyone's super generous. Everyone is that I've ever approached, and people I know who have approached other people, everyone's always open for a chat. And whether they're able to assist you directly or they're able to put you in touch with someone else as well. So I would just encourage people to back themselves. And, I kind of always go by the old adage of it's always a no if you never ask. You've literally got nothing to lose. And more often than not, people will open their doors anyway. So
what's going on in your world, Tim? Where are you at these days? What have you got coming up? What's your plans?
Well, interestingly, I've throughout my directing career, I've always been exclusive to various production companies. And as of very recently, just kind of launched into the freelance world, which is exciting. I'm pretty pumped about exploring new opportunities, having that kind of freedom and flexibility to work with different producers, different agencies, different production companies, working both here in Melbourne and in Sydney. I also have a kind of a base camp in Sydney, which is, I'm very fortunate to have that. And I'm working more up in Brisbane as well. I just did a job up there. I'm pretty pumped to see what's out there and to work with some different people.
Tim Potter, it has been an absolute pleasure sitting and chatting with you. Thanks so much for taking time. Loved what you had to talk about. Always great to hear from somebody who's got, a few strings to their bow. Look forward to seeing more work from you, and really exciting that you get to be out there in the different markets, working with the different production companies, working with just a myriad of different people. So good luck.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
Well, that's it for today. I'll make the logo bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, There's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.